Chapter 43. Not Today. Back in Belvedere, Verona told herself to get it together. She thought, not today. Verona took 2 big sniffs and 1 deep breath, wiped the tears from her eyes, and straightened up. She mustered up some extraordinary courage and said, "A sir needs us, and Adam and Lake are gone, so it's just going to be us 3. So let's get to it. We're going to follow the plan, and we're going to be okay. Lincoln, you're coming with me." Looking back at Jack, she asked, "Jack, are you okay?" He nodded. Verona turned back towards Lincoln. Her little brother looked terrified, more terrified than Verona had ever seen him look before. Lincoln cried, "How can we do this? It's insane. I can't even stand up to Aaron, Donnie, and Billy on the school bus. So how could I ever stand up to evil monsters who don't just want to tease me? They want to kill me. I can't." Verona looked straight into his eyes and said, "I know this is an unbelievable and completely unfair thing to ask of you, but I promise I will not let anything happen to you. A sir needs us, so he must go, and that is just how it is." Verona continued, "I will not leave you, and I have to go, so that means you're coming with me. We are going to be okay." Verona just kept saying they were going to be okay, as if saying it over and over would make it true. The truth was, she wasn't just trying to convince Lincoln. She was also trying to convince herself. Verona got even closer to Lincoln. She put her hands on his shoulders and said, "It's okay to be scared. I'm scared. It's also okay that you have not found your gift yet, because I know you have great strength in you, and you will find it." Verona wiped her brother's tears off his cheeks and said, "Now, what do you say? Are you with me?" Lincoln looked at his brave older sister, gave her a half smile, and slowly nodded. He then wiped away a tear, rolling down his sister's cheek. He looked her in the eyes and whispered the bravest words he had ever uttered in this life. "I've always been with you, so what are we waiting for? Let's do this already." Verona smiled at her brother and gave Jack a quick lesson on how to drive the car. And then she grabbed Jack's backpack. She noticed her friend looking peaked and clammy, and once more asked, "Jack, are you okay? You don't look so good." "I'm fine. It's just really hot out here," Jack reassured her. Relenting because there was nothing else she could do, Verona said to Jack, "Just be careful. We'll see you soon." With that, she and Lincoln quietly opened the door and snuck out. They ran to the playground and hid in the enclosed spiral tube slide. Jack gave them about 5 minutes before he turned on the engine. Slowly and awkwardly, Jack turned the bug around to face the opposite direction. Then he put the car in reverse and crept closer to the herd of beasts. When Jack was only about 20 yards away from the edge of the crowd, he stopped. Jack felt the sharp pain in his cheek as a burning sensation started running down his neck. He rubbed it and felt the blood on his fingers for a few seconds before telling himself to refocus. Jack could taste copper as he broke out into a sweat and fever. Although it was incredibly hot, Jack felt cold. The pain was intense. He squeezed his eyes shut to try to ease his pain, but it overtook him, and Jack passed out. For several minutes, he did not move. Verona knew something was wrong. Jack had not looked good, and she believed he had lost consciousness. From where she was, she attempted to get into her friend's head and wake him up. Verona closed her eyes and concentrated. while under Jack had the sensation that he was falling. He heard Nuren's voice in his head instructing him to find it, find your peace. He reached for the thought of his mother, holding him and singing to him. Finally, he heard music playing. As he listened, he felt the pain slipping away. Then the music stopped. He heard an old record player skipping and scratching at the end of its track. He knew the sound because although these machines were ancient relics to a 13-year-old, his mother still had one and liked to play it while cleaning the house, and Jack liked to listen. This memory gave Jack the strength he needed to open his eyes. Jack awoke to a slightly different scratching sound. It was the sound of creatures clawing and scraping at the little car's metal frame and glass windows. Jack startled. Normally, a sight like that would have terrified him, but he wasn't afraid. The young man was calm. He took a deep breath, shook his head, and said to himself, "Not today." He put the car into drive and started moving. The large beasts tried to hold on, but they began to fall off the VW bug as Jack picked up speed. As the last of them fell, Jack slammed on the car horn. Beep! Verona opened her eyes when she heard the horn. Just as she predicted, a bunch of the creatures who had not yet seen the commotion turned their gaze from Assur's house towards Jack and the VW bug. Jack kept hitting the horn and slowly drove away from the house. It seemed to be working. There was a large commotion within the herd. Hundreds of glowing eyes had now turned and illuminated Assur's little car. They began following the sound of the horn. Verona had the walkie-talkie in one hand and Lincoln's hand in the other. From their hiding spot, she was looking for a large enough opening to run through. Although the plan was working, not all of the ghouls had turned to follow the car, and there were still just too many Jinn between the siblings and their home. Thinking it wouldn't get any better, Verona commanded, "Let's go." Even though she was scared, she managed to sound confident and in control. The two started to move. At first, they were walking slowly. Then they picked up the pace, and soon they were sprinting at full speed. But then the Jinn started to notice. The two had managed to get about 30 yards from the front door when their path abruptly closed, and they had to stop running. The siblings were confronted by a group of about 10 ghouls that stood in their way. Verona squeezed Lincoln's hand and looked around for an escape route. Surrounded on all sides, they were trapped. The Jinn were getting closer and closer. Verona closed her eyes, and when she did, 5 of the Jinn in front of them suddenly stopped. They turned toward the others, and the Jinn, under the little girl's spell, started to attack the other Jinn directly behind them. Verona had gotten into their minds and caused them to turn on each other. The two saw their chance and again began to run towards the house. But the commotion she had just created only attracted more ghouls. Soon, they were again surrounded, but this time, there were too many for Verona to manipulate. She was concentrating her hardest, causing some to turn on the others, but it wasn't enough. The Jinn were quickly closing the gap on all sides, and Verona and Lincoln were helpless to avoid their attackers. They had gotten so close, but there was nothing else Verona could do. Verona pulled Lincoln close, anticipating the attack that would occur at any second. Verona yelled out to Lincoln, "I'm sorry." She again closed her eyes, but this time she understood it was over. Waves of fear crashed over her. With no way out, Verona thought back to that swing set in the park. She pictured herself swinging. She looked to her left and saw Lincoln's smiling face as he swung carefree, higher and higher. However, this time, it wasn't just a conjured image. It was a real memory of when they were both happy. Even as the end was imminent, the thought of this made Verona smile as a tear fell down her face. She squeezed her little brother even tighter. Verona expected a Jinni strike at any moment, but instead, she heard the loud engine of a large vehicle as well as the inhuman screams of the underworld creatures. She opened her eyes to see a car plowing into the herd of ghouls, wiping out dozens of them, just to the left of the siblings. When this happened, the Jinn turned their attention to the threat, quickly forgetting about the two small children. Then a second car came careening into the Jinn just to the right of them. This freed up a direct path to the house. Verona and Lincoln wasted no time and ran the remaining 15 yards to the house. As they ran, Verona raised her right hand, holding the walkie-talkie, and called for Assur to open the door. There was no answer. Fearing the worst, the two reached the porch and started banging on the front door. "Let us in! Let us in!" they screamed. Some of the ghouls noticed and moved towards the siblings. As they reached for the terrified children, the door finally opened, and the kids fell into the duplex, shutting the door behind them. Once inside, still breathing hard, Verona sat up on her knees, trying to catch her breath. Once she caught her wind, she quickly got to her feet to check on Assur. He had sat back down in his old armchair in front of his cold and dark fireplace. He was almost unrecognizable. He looked fragile and gaunt. Meanwhile, Lincoln found a small crack in the boarded-up front window that he used to look outside. Due to the lights from the eyes of the ghouls and the headlights of the two cars, he was able to see that the VW Bug was one of the vehicles that had crashed into the herd. But Lincoln could not see Jack. The other was the Moon Woman's station wagon. Then Lincoln spotted Adam. Adam was out of the car. He had ripped a mailbox out of the ground and was using it like a baseball bat, sending Jinn flying with every swing. Then Lincoln noticed Lake right before her brother. It looked like she had a tight grip on the back of Adam's t-shirt. All the Jinn had returned, and even Adam was in danger of being overpowered. When they got close enough, Lincoln ran over and opened the door. Lake ran inside. The door remained open for a few seconds as Adam sent a few more creatures flying. Then he ran into the house and slammed the door shut, locking it behind him. Once inside, Verona ran over to greet Lake and Adam. She said, "Once again, you saved our lives. I can't believe you came back." Verona looked around and shouted, "Where's Jack? Jack is still out there. We must help him." Then Verona heard a familiar voice right behind her say, "We really should go get him." Startled, Verona turned around to see her friend as he materialized right before her eyes. He was laughing with a huge grin on his face. "Jack!" Verona shouted. Then she hugged him so hard they both fell to the floor. The two were helped up by Adam. He gave Jack a big slap on the back and said, "Well done, my friend." Jack smiled at his tall companion, but then the smile disappeared as Jack's eyes rolled back into his head, and he collapsed to the floor. All of the children scrambled toward Jack, and Lake wasted no time attending to her friend. Lake held his hand and touched his face. After roughly 5 minutes of worrying, Jack finally opened his eyes and asked in a groggy, scratchy voice, "Where's the food? I'm starving." The group let out a collective sigh of relief and began to laugh. Verona told them to take it easy and sent Lincoln to the kitchen to get some food for their friend. When he returned, the group turned their attention to the old man sitting in the chair. Lincoln grabbed Lake's hand and led her to a sir. The old man didn't even have the strength to react. Lake could see his weariness and knew he needed her help. She smiled and said, "It is very nice to make your acquaintance. My name is Lake Worthy, and this is my brother Adam. You are our grandpa." Sir tried to move his hand, but could only manage to wriggle his left index finger while it rested on his chair's armrest. Lake reached out and grabbed it. Suddenly, Sir was just able to manage enough strength to scoot a bit in his chair. Lake climbed into the old chair and wrapped herself around the slender old man. Verona got some blankets from the hallway closet. Even though a lot had just happened, nobody felt much like talking. In short order, they each found places and collapsed with exhaustion. Lincoln noticed for the first time that he wasn't wearing his hat. He quickly looked around, but soon realized it must have fallen off outside during all the excitement.